All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive.
Sounds good.
Into the world of parathyroid hormone, or PTH.
PTH.
Now, you might be thinking, PTH? What's that? But trust me, this hormone is like the conductor of your body's calcium orchestra.
Yeah. Okay.
Making sure everything's in tune and playing its part.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So calcium is super important for a lot of things in your body.
Exactly.
Your muscles need it to contract.
Yeah.
Your nerves need it to send signals.
Right.
Even your blood needs it to clot properly.
Uh-huh.
Without enough calcium, things can go wrong pretty quickly.
Exactly. And that's where PTH swoops in.
Yep.
So we've got some really interesting excerpts from a medical text here that get into the nitty-gritty of how PTH is made, how it works, its magic, and what happens when things get out of whack.
It all starts with those parathyroid glands.
Oh, okay.
Those tiny but mighty glands in your neck.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that make PTH.
Okay.
But it's not a simple process.
Right.
It's more like building a car.
Okay.
You start with a basic frame,
Yeah.
and then you add all the parts to make it work.
So we're not talking about just like flipping a switch and churning out PTH?
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's a multi-step process.
Right.
The parathyroid glands start with this precursor molecule called pre-pro-PTH.
Pre-pro-PTH.
It's like this long chain of building blocks.
Okay.
115 amino acids to be exact.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So that's like our basic frame for the car, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Then comes the refining process.
Yes.
The pre-pro-PTH goes through these steps where it gets chopped and trimmed down.
Okay.
Kind of like sculpting a statue.
Interesting.
Eventually, we're left with the active form of PTH.
Okay, yeah.
A lean, mean, 84 amino acid machine.
Wow.
Ready to do its job.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So this finely sculpted PTH is released into the bloodstream.
Right.
And then...
Well, imagine PTH has a bunch of keys, and each key fits into a specific lock on different cells in your body.
Gotcha.
Those locks are called receptors.
Okay.
When PTH binds to a receptor, it sends a signal that tells the cell to do something specific.
So it's like PTH is sending out instructions to different parts of the body.
Yep.
Okay.
One of the main receptors PTH interacts with is called PTH-1R.
PTH-1R.
And it's found in bone and kidney cells. And it's crucial for regulating calcium levels.
Okay.
But here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
We're now discovering other types of PTH receptors.
Oh, wow.
Like the CPTHRs.
CPTHRs.
These receptors are still kind of a mystery.
Okay.
But they add another layer of complexity to the whole PTH story.
It's like we're uncovering the secret language that PTH uses to communicate with the body.
Exactly.
But let's get back to the calcium thing for a second.
Okay.
We've established that PTH is all about keeping calcium levels in check. How exactly does that work?
Well, think of it as a dance.
Okay.
A delicate tango
Right.
between calcium and PTH.
The calcium PTH tango.
Yeah.
I like that.
They're constantly communicating and adjusting to each other to maintain that perfect balance.
But how does this dance actually play out?
Imagine you're walking a tightrope.
Okay.
You need to constantly make these tiny adjustments to stay balanced, right?
Yeah.
That's what calcium and PTH are doing.
Yep.
Even the slightest dip in calcium levels triggers a rapid response from PTH.
So PTH is like the safety net, making sure we don't fall off the calcium tightrope.
Precisely.
I like it.
PTH will signal the bones to release some of their stored calcium.
Okay.
And it'll tell the kidneys to hold on to more calcium.
Right.
Instead of letting it go to waste. It can even boost the production of active vitamin D.
Okay.
Which helps your gut absorb more calcium from food.
Wow. So it's a whole coordinated effort.
It is.
To get those calcium levels back up.
Yep. But you mentioned that it's a two-way street, right?
It is.
It's not just PTH controlling calcium.
Right.
But calcium also influences PTH.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So calcium acts like a feedback mechanism, keeping PTH in check.
Gotcha.
When calcium levels are high, it essentially tells the parathyroid glands to cool it with the PTH production.
So it's like this beautiful feedback loop, constantly making adjustments to keep everything in harmony.
Exactly.
But what about when this harmony is disrupted? What happens when the calcium PTH tango goes wrong?
That's where things can get tricky.
Okay.
And that's exactly what we'll be exploring next.
All right, I'm ready.
Let's do it. So, you know, it's pretty amazing how even these tiny little glitches in this calcium PTH dance can have some pretty big consequences.
Okay, so what kind of glitches?
Well, sometimes the problem is actually in the parathyroid glands themselves.
Okay.
They can get kind of overactive, churning out too much PTH.
Which messes up the whole calcium balance.
Right.
That's what's called hyperparathyroidism.
Hyperparathyroidism.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, it can be.
So what causes the parathyroid glands to go, like, rogue?
Well, there's actually a few different ways it can happen.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a benign tumor on one of the glands that makes
Right.
it produce too much PTH.
Mm-hmm.
Other times it's a response to low calcium levels.
Okay.
Like if someone has kidney failure.
Interesting.
That's called secondary hyperparathyroidism.
Secondary hyperparathyroidism.
Right.
So in that case, the parathyroid glands are just trying to, like, compensate
Exactly.
for something else.
They're working overtime to try and get calcium from wherever they can.
Uh-huh.
But sometimes that can cause even more problems.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about the other glitches you were talking about?
Right.
The ones that aren't in the glands themselves?
Yeah, so sometimes the issue isn't with the glands,
Okay.
but with the body's ability to even sense the calcium. There's this special receptor called the calcium sensing receptor,
Oh, okay.
or KSR.
KSR.
And
Yeah.
it plays a big role in this.
So what happens if the KSR isn't working, right?
Well, it's kind of like having a broken thermostat.
Oh, okay.
The body doesn't realize that the calcium level's already high enough,
Uh-huh.
so the parathyroid glands just keep pumping out PTH,
Oh, wow.
even when they don't need to.
So it's like a communication breakdown
Exactly.
between the calcium sensor and the parathyroid glands.
That's a good way to put it.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, it can lead to a condition called familial hypercalcemia,
Okay.
or FHH for short.
FHH. Okay.
It's a genetic condition.
Gotcha.
And people with FHH usually have higher than normal calcium,
Okay.
but they don't always have symptoms.
So even though their calcium is high, it's
Yeah.
not really causing problems.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah, their bodies kind of adapt to that higher calcium level.
Wow. The human body is so adaptable.
It is,
So are there any things outside the body that can mess with this system?
definitely.
Yeah.
One surprising one is lithium.
Lithium.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with PTH?
Well, lithium is a medication often used to treat bipolar disorder.
Right.
But it turns out that lithium can interfere with that calcium sensing receptor,
Huh.
making it less sensitive to calcium.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So does that mean if you take lithium,
Yeah.
you could be more likely to get hyperparathyroidism?
It's possible, but it's not a sure thing.
Okay.
Lithium's effects on PTH can vary a lot,
Okay.
and it's not usually a big problem unless someone already has parathyroid issues.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
So we've been talking a lot about calcium,
Uh-huh.
but I know that PTH does more than just regulate calcium.
That's right.
What are some of its other roles?
Well, for starters, PTH is super important for bone health.
Right.
It has this interesting double role.
Okay.
It can both stimulate bone breakdown
Mm-hmm.
and bone formation.
Wait, how can it do both of those things?
It all depends on how much PTH there is and for how long.
Okay.
When PTH levels are high for a long time, like
Yeah.
in hyperparathyroidism,
Mm-hmm.
it can lead to too much bone breakdown.
Right.
It's like you're always taking money out of your savings account.
Uh-huh.
Eventually, you're going to run out.
Okay, so too much PTH for too long can weaken bones.
Exactly.
Okay.
But here's the interesting part.
What's that?
When PTH is given in short bursts,
Okay.
like in some treatments for osteoporosis,
Mm-hmm.
it can actually help build bone.
Oh, wow.
It's like making regular deposits into your savings account,
Right.
helping it grow.
So it's all about the balance,
It is.
the right amount at the right time.
Exactly.
I like that.
That's why understanding PTH is so important for treating bone diseases.
That's super interesting.
It is.
So what about its role in the kidneys?
Yeah, PTH plays a big role in the kidneys too.
Okay.
It helps them hold on to calcium
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't get lost in urine.
Mm.
And it also helps the kidneys get rid of extra phosphate,
Okay.
which is important for keeping the right balance of minerals in your blood.
So it's fine-tuning those mineral levels.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Right.
You also mentioned before something about vitamin D activation.
Oh, right.
How does that work?
Yeah, so PTH actually stimulates the kidneys
Uh-huh.
to make the active form of vitamin D
Okay.
called calcitriol.
Oh, yeah, calcitriol. What was that again?
Calcitriol basically helps your gut absorb calcium from food.
Right, right.
It's like a VIP pass for calcium absorption.
Okay, so it's all connected.
Yeah,
PTH helps regulate calcium directly,
right.
but it also helps the body absorb more calcium
Exactly.
by boosting calcitriol.
That's right.
That's so cool how it all works together.
It is. It's a great example of how hormones work together to keep everything running smoothly.
So we've covered PTH's role in calcium regulation, bone health, and kidney function.
Yep.
Is there anything else this hormone does?
Actually, there is. Researchers are finding some links between PTH and other systems in the body, too.
Oh, wow. Like what?
Like our cardiovascular system,
Okay.
glucose metabolism, even our muscles and nerves.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me more about these new areas of research.
Okay, well, one of the most interesting findings is that PTH might have a role in vascular calcification.
Vascular calcification?
Right.
What's that?
It's when calcium builds up in the walls of blood vessels.
Wait, so the calcium that's supposed to be in our bones ends up in our blood vessels?
That's right.
That doesn't sound good.
Yeah, it's not good at all.
So what happens when calcium builds up in your blood vessels?
Well, it makes the blood vessels stiff and less flexible.
Okay.
And that can lead to high blood pressure.
Right.
And increase the risk of heart attacks and strokes.
It's a serious problem.
Yeah, especially for people with chronic kidney disease.
And you're saying that PTH might actually be involved in this process?
It seems that way.
So the hormone that's supposed to be controlling calcium might actually be making it build up in the wrong places.
It's a bit of a paradox.
That's wild.
Yeah, it shows just how complex these systems really are.
Right.
And it's making researchers look into new ways of managing PTH.
Okay.
Not just to protect bones, but to also maybe help protect the heart.
So PTH is kind of like this double-edged sword.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
It's really important, but it can also cause problems if it's not controlled.
Exactly. And that's why research is so important.
Yeah.
We need to understand all the different things PTH does.
Right.
So we can figure out how to use it safely and effectively.
And you mentioned some other interesting areas where PTH might play a role.
Right.
What about its connection to glucose and metabolism?
Yeah. So there's some evidence that PTH might affect how our bodies process glucose.
Glucose, that's sugar, right?
Right, the sugar that gives our cells energy.
Right.
And some studies have shown a link between PTH levels and insulin resistance.
Now, insulin resistance, that's when cells don't respond to insulin properly.
That's right.
Which can lead to type 2 diabetes.
Exactly.
So could PTH be a factor in diabetes?
It's too early to say, for sure.
Okay.
But it's definitely something that needs more research.
It could be a whole new way of looking at diabetes.
Could.
What about PTH and muscles and nerves?
Yeah. So some studies suggest that PTH might directly affect those as well.
Okay. How so?
For example, it's been linked to muscle weakness and fatigue.
Interesting.
And some think it might even play a role in some neurological conditions.
Wow. So PTH is involved in all sorts of things.
It really is.
It's like this master controller behind the scenes.
You could say that.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it shows how interconnected everything is in our bodies.
Right. And how powerful hormones can be.
Exactly. And the more we learn about PTH, the more we realize there's still so much to discover.
Well, this deep dive into the world of PTH has been fascinating.
I agree.
We've gone from those tiny parathyroid glands
to this complex dance with calcium.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing how PTH might affect so many different things.
It's pretty incredible.
Bone health, kidney function, maybe even the heart, glucose metabolism, muscles, and nerves.
It's a hormone that deserves our attention.
It really does.
And as we learn more, I'm sure we'll find even more ways that it impacts our health.
So we've covered a lot today.
We have.
But I'm left with one final question.
Okay, shoot.
If PTH has all these different effects, how can we use its power for good?
Right.
And at the same time, minimize any potential problems?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is. As we learn more, can we develop new treatments that fine-tune PTH?
Okay.
Instead of just blocking it completely.
That's a great point.
The future of PTH research is full of possibilities.
I think so, too.
And I'm excited to see what we discover next.
Me too.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of parathyroid hormone.
My pleasure. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions.